Before we get going with the program, there are a few acknowledgements that I need to make. We need to acknowledge several people for their amazing dedication to the health of our community. The Nadhery family have dedicated more than 2 decades to providing our community with vital education to ensure the health of future generations. Not only do they dedicate their time, but are incredible supporters of the Dominican Hospital Foundation, which provides countless opportunities and resources for our entire community. You will hear more from Joshua this morning, but please join me now in acknowledging the Nadhery family. You can see some of the foundation's business sponsors being flashed up, and there's also a foundation table. Just take a moment to recognize the sponsors. They're vitally important to allowing us to put on events like this, and also to provide the community with state-of-the-art medical equipment, healing gardens, and community classes, to name but a few of the foundation activities. So take a moment to look at those. And I'd like to especially acknowledge the Dominican Foundation staff for all of their help for putting this event on. So with that, I'd like to, it's my great pleasure now to introduce Joshua Nadhery to the stage. Joshua was just 18 years old when he lost his brother, John. At the inception of the symposium in 1999, Joshua took an active role as a family representative and later took on the role of co-chair of the advisory board. Joshua is now the nurse administrator at the Department of Veteran Affairs in Sacramento and continues to be an integral member of the symposium team. Please join me again in welcoming Joshua.
Good morning, everyone. I cannot believe that for so long we've been, for over 21 years. This year we just got our new banner. The last one said celebrating over a decade. And we decided that we needed to update it. And in 10 more years we'll do the same. So I just wanted to welcome everyone to this wonderful event. We have over 400 people in attendance. And just before I start, I wanted to say that, I was talking with my mom, and it's wonderful to see a new generation of counselors and educators. When I started this when I was 18, I was probably the youngest person in the room. We had probably 30 people. It was over in the little room over there. And it was just wonderful to see. It's been amazing to see the growth and so many wonderful people coming year after year. And I know many of you have been with us for over 10 years. And I think that really says a lot about you, about this event, and particularly about our community. As I've grown up from an adolescence to now I'm a husband and a father of 2 beautiful children who often keep me on my toes, I often think of my brother and wonder what his life would have been like today. And though this symposium bears his name, I feel it's come to represent all families struggling with suicide, violence, death of a loved one, mental illness, and other critical issues that affect our youth today. My family is incredibly gratified to have seen this symposium in memory of John develop over these years into the widely attended event of today. And as difficult as our loss was, the sense of the community consistently coming together to prevent similar tragedies is a very healing force. We continue to be impressed by the diversity of the attendees, clinicians, counselors, educators, parents, public safety officials who have attended symposiums year over year. The post-symposium comments and the number of attendees clearly show that together we are making a real impact on our community. My family's deepest appreciation goes to those who have planned the details of the event, Karen, members of the committee, to all the advisory committee. It is the hard work and dedication. If I could have them stand, just to be acknowledged. I have never met a more dedicated group of people, and I'm very honored to be associated with them. The tireless volunteers who have helped plan the logistics of this event, the Dominican Foundation, which is the philanthropic arm of our symposium, and it is with their support that we've established the John E. Nadhery Calciano Endowment Fund. And lastly, and most importantly, is all of you. Because of your support for over 2 decades, excuse me, this symposium has expanded on topics ranging from suicide to autism. And it is your continued quest for knowledge that allows us to bring such wonderful speakers year after year. We simply could not have done this event without your support. In summary, I want to thank you for being part of this symposium today, and hope you find this information presented to be beneficial in your work. It will continue to grow year after year. And I'd like to end my presentation with a quote from my mother, and I think this sums up very well how we all feel. The symposium has had such an incredible positive effect on our family and the community. I hope it continues to grow, because the ultimate goal for us is to prevent similar tragedies from happening in our community of Santa Cruz. Thank you. And now it is my distinct pleasure to introduce Dr. Farris Sabbah. Dr. Sabbah has worked in education for over 25 years, mostly within the Pajaro Valley Unified School District as a teacher and as an administrator. He received his bachelor's degree from UCSC, well, that's my alma mater, his master's from San Jose State University, and his doctorate in educational equity from UC Berkeley. Dr. Farris believes wholeheartedly that education is about serving the whole child to disrupt inequitable practices and uplift student voice. Dr. Sabbah joined Santa Cruz County Office of Education in 2016 as Deputy Superintendent and is currently our County Superintendent of Schools. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Sabbah.
Good morning. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this 2019 Calciano Youth Symposium. Thank you for being a part of this important work and for bringing opportunity and hope to the youth of Santa Cruz County. I'd like to give another applause to the Calciano family for year after year bringing us together to interface with experts and learn about how we can support our youth. Let's please give the Calciano family a warm applause. Thank you. In these symposiums, we have an opportunity to interface with experts, to learn about solutions, and to address some of the important challenges that our youth face. Today's topic is no exception. The misuse of and addiction to opioids is a serious national crisis. There is substantial evidence that reaffirms the critical nature and often deadly consequences of the epidemic here in Santa Cruz County. Though Santa Cruz County's opioid prescription rate has slowly decreased over the last 5 years, it still remains higher than the state average. In 2017, Santa Cruz County ranked 20th among 58 California counties for the high opioid overdose death rate. Our students tell us that this problem also exists in our schools. Every 2 years, as many of you know, we survey our students and we ask about their experiences and perspectives on a variety of topics. On our most recent California Healthy Kids survey, 18.4% of students stated that they have been offered, sold, or given illegal drugs at school in the last 12 months. 4.4% of our students report that they have taken prescription medication not prescribed to them in the last 30 days. And 2.5% of our students stated that they feel they need help with their drug or alcohol addiction. Now, when we look at these measures and indicators from an equity perspective, we see that we have an additional dimension to this problem. We see that our population of African American youth disclose on the survey nearly twice the rates of access, use, and abuse of these dangerous substances. In Santa Cruz County, we know that complex problems require a thoughtful, multidisciplinary, trauma-informed approach. This symposium allows us to come together as a community to shatter silos, learn from experts, pool resources, and find evidence-based methods to prevention, treatment, and recovery. Let's work together to fight and solve this challenge. And now it's my distinct pleasure to introduce our first presenter. After 12 years as a pain and opioid researcher, in 1995, Dr. Thomas joined the National Institute on Drug Abuse, NIDA, where he has managed much of NIDA's pain and opioid research efforts. In 2015, he joined the DSPR's Service Research Branch. He currently is co-chair of the NIDA Prescription Opioids and Pain Work Group, which fosters pain and opioid research and education. He's also a founding member of the National Institute of Health Pain Consortium, which promotes pain research across the NIH. He is a member of the Department of Health and Human Services Behavioral Health Coordination Committee, Prescription Opioid Subcommittee, National Pain Strategy, Working Group on Provider Education, and the Interagency Pain Research Coordination Committee. Dr. Thomas served as the NIH liaison to the CDC in the development of the CDC guidelines on opioid prescriptions for chronic pain. Dr. Thomas is also the lead on the NIH Pain Consortium Centers of Excellence in Pain Education, which is promoting pain education, medical, dental, nursing, pharmacy, and other professional schools. Please join me in welcoming Dr. David Thomas.
It's a real honor to be here on this special occasion with what you're doing here and to see you folks out here as a community. I think I heard the word community 4 or 5 times already, and I think we'll hear it all day, and I think that's extremely important. I first have a few thank yous, Karen. You were amazing. We were difficult, okay? It's not easy to travel government people. We have all these rules and stuff. She got us here. So, and the Calciano family, thank you for what you're doing. I had an inkling about what this was, but now I'm really seeing it. I'm so glad to be a part of this, and you're honoring Don. So, yeah, get back to community. That's gonna be a big part of my talk today, because I think that's really, you are a big part of the solution to the opioid crisis, the pain crisis, mental health crises. I think us being together and working together is the solution. So what I'm going to present today, my title is Pain and Drug Addiction, how they're intertwined, and that's a pretty complicated topic. So, but I'm going to try. I'm going to go to the societal problems of pain and opioid abuse, and also drug abuse on top of that. I'm going to look at the interactions of drug abuse and pain in the brain, how it works in the brain. Very simple. I don't do complicated talks. And then I'm going to look at something of the landscape of the problems that we have with opioid abuse, drug abuse, and pain, and then some of the solutions we're working on. And the good news is opioids and pain are the top priority of the NIH right now, which means we're going to get a lot done. But I'm not going to present everything that we're doing. That would take too long. So instead of that, I'm just presenting my favorite things. But I think I'm presenting things that represent what we're trying to accomplish. I have no disclosures, except that I care, nothing to disclose. But I do always like to admit, though, that I care very much about people in pain, people with substance abuse problems, mental health problems. I'm kind of an advocate on top of that, but I get no money for doing that other than my pay. Okay, you might have seen this slide before, something like it, as the opioid crisis has evolved, expanded, and gotten worse. But it really shows what's happened over the last 20 years. And the crisis has not only expanded, but it's evolved. The first, in the beginning, it was a prescription drug abuse problem. People were, in the 90s, were getting prescribed way too much opioids. Pill mills were opening. The floodgates were starting to open, and a lot of opioids hit the street, and people were starting to misuse and abuse them. And that started to kill a lot of people, and it started to slow down. We're starting to level off over the last few years. Prescribing is going down, hopefully appropriately, but the problem didn't end there, because next came heroin around 2010. Heroin is relatively cheap, and it's on the street, it's powerful and readily available. people started to overdose on heroin. So prescription drug abuse was starting to level off, but heroin was, pardon the pun, shooting up. But now heroin appears to, at least has a trend to leveling off, which is good news. But now I'm sure you've all heard about fentanyl. Fentanyl is about 100 times stronger than heroin, and it's being put in mixtures of heroin where a user thinks they're getting heroin, they're putting in other drugs like cocaine, so people that never, potentially never done opioids are overdosing on opioids when they think they're getting cocaine. So that's the problem we have right now. And it doesn't just hit. This is a few years old, this slide, but it's not just the people that die. For everybody that dies, there's 10 treatment admissions for abuse, 32 emergency room department visits, people are dependent, 130. There's a whole pyramid of problems, and it's not just the people that die. Okay, so this is a map. I'm just going to go through like a cartoon showing you the opioid overdose spread, the epidemic. This is 1999. I think I pointed to you guys with that little arrow, so you are there. And then I just want to, and red is bad, so red means more deaths. These are deaths per 100,000 people. And if you just notice, it's bloody obvious that it's getting worse and worse. And note that this is an unusual epidemic. Typically, when you have a drug abuse epidemic, it'll spread from coasts or from points of entries. But this is starting more in rural America and branching out. But it doesn't stop there. 2016. Now 2016, I ran this one myself. It's not doesn't look as bad as 2014, but they expanded the scale where red, dark red now means 30 people. So it was just getting too red, so they had to recalibrate. Here's a comparison of the lethal dose of heroin, fentanyl, and carfentanil. Carfentanil is about 100 times more potent than fentanyl. Fentanyl is about 100 times, 50 to 100 times more potent than heroin. That little bit will kill you, and that's part of the problem because fentanyl is so easy to ship, because it's so small, it's cheap to make, and you make a little measurement error, and somebody gets a lethal dose. And by the way, carfentanil is actually elephant tranquilizer, and people are getting elephant tranquilizer. So it's very disturbing. There was recently a bust of fentanyl coming into the United States. I just took this from the news. They seized 254 pounds of fentanyl from the floor of a truck. It was coming in through Mexico, and that much fentanyl was enough to kill over 50 million people. It's like in one truck. There was another seizure somewhere around New York City, and that could have killed the whole population of New York. So this is really strong stuff, and it does not take much to kill you. And the fact that fentanyl's out there now is not a total shock, because this has happened historically with crackdowns on various drugs, like alcohol during Prohibition. You crack down on alcohol, and then the substance gets stronger. It's easier to transport, and it's harder to detect. So this is a disturbing trend, and we need to find a way to stop this, because it does not take much to kill you, and the trajectory is disturbing. It's something of a weapon of mass destruction, if you will. Okay, so how do we get into this mess? Where did it begin? And one could track it back to a lot of different places. We like to blame bad doctors or bad pharma. I don't want to blame anybody at this point. It was a big mess, but prescribing is part of the problem. Prescribing went through the roof. 91, there were about 76 million prescriptions per year. This only goes up to 2012, but it went over 200,000. It's going down a little bit now, but at its peak, people were prescribed enough opioids in the United States so that everyone in the United States could have a month's supply. So that's a lot of opioids. And when you have a lot of opioids, people in pain need them, but they're very easy to divert when there's a glut. Give you one example of a time when opioids tend not to be needed as much, but there's a glut coming from them. There are about 50 million surgical procedures each year. Most of them you'll get opioids for, which is fine because surgery is trauma. But typically people walk home with way more than they need, maybe a month's supply when they take 2 or 3 or none. And those opioids are just sitting out there year after year and can be used. Another part of the problem is education. So you have a lot of opioids out there. They're being used instead of just comprehensive pain treatment. So you go to the doctors and you would think that they would know how to take care of your pain. But in medical school, this is just medical school I'm showing here, on the average, clinicians get 9 hours of training over 4 years in the United States. 9 hours to know how to take care of so many people in pain with so many different types of pain. It's no wonder that first opioids are appealing because you just prescribe them. You don't have to know that much. You have serious pain, you prescribe them. And they're hard not to prescribe. If you prescribe opioids, it would take 30 seconds. If you don't prescribe them, it could take 30 minutes. So doctors in the United States, about 9 hours of training on pain. In Canada, they get more. But if you go further and look at veterinary schools, they get like 10 times more. And this is Canada, but they get 10 times more. So, and my vet knows this. I didn't put the slide in there, but my vet does acupuncture and all this stuff. We talk about pain while he's doing acupuncture. He gets it. My doctors tend not to, and I have to explain stuff to them. So that's part of the problem. You have a lot of prescribing, doctors that aren't really taking care of pain well. And then this is just a study we've done recently about what gets reimbursed. It's getting better, but a lot of treatments that are effective for pain, like acupuncture, don't get reimbursed very much. Opioids get reimbursed a lot. Things like psychological interventions, acupuncture, and other treatments or combinations of treatments that could be effective are just not used very much. So this too is a problem because that pushes you more for opioids. Okay. But it's not just a problem with opioids. Sir, can you hand me my water? We have a pain crisis in the United States too. This is, let's see, there we go. If you look from 1999 to 2011, the American Pain Society estimated there were 50 million people in serious pain, serious to moderate pain. And depending on how you define it, we all feel pain except for a few individuals in the world that feel no pain. And those people are in bad shape because that's a genetic disorder that's really not good to have. But about 50 million Americans had pain in 1999, whereas in 2011, it went up to 100 million. Pain doubled in about 10 years over that period. And a paper just came out showing that it's still very high in the United States. What's the reason for the increase in pain? Well, the Institute of Medicine suggested people are getting older, which is true. The population's a little bigger, so that makes up for some of it. People are getting heavier, and that load does cause pain, but that doesn't explain a doubling of a condition, pain, which is not contagious. So something else is going on here. I can't prove this, but there's a phenomenon called opioid-induced hyperalgesia, and it's insidious. If you take an opioid, and this is shown in animals for sure, and people it looks like it also happens, and if you keep taking an opioid, there's a rebound effect. It stops your pain, which is good, but then your pain comes back stronger than before. And you keep taking opioids, and you have worse and worse and worse pain. And we don't know how much that's contributing to chronic pain, but if you look at people with super high dose opioids, they tend to be in really, really bad pain. And some of that pain might just be them trying to treat the pain of their own pain treatment. So we're working on that. I'm going to describe a couple angles with that, but that's a serious problem that we need to address because that could be contributing to tens of millions of people in pain. Okay. Now I'm going to do some very basic neuroscience. I'm a neuroscientist by training, I'll have to admit that. So this is not like real high quality pictures for neuroscience, but I just want to get some basic concepts because I like real simple stuff. So how does pain work? Well, signals come up to your brain Okay, there's a signal coming up your spinal cord. I didn't call that a pain signal because it's really not. If you touch something and it hurts, that hurts in your brain. You get a signal saying that there's a hot temperature, there's squishing of your skin, there's pinpricks or something like that, but that's just a signal. It goes to your brain and it goes all over the place. Pain is all over your brain. It involves emotional components and attentional things and memories, and you make distinctions between it. Your whole brain is the pain reaction. But a signal come up, your brain, I'm in pain. That's the brain. It's all over the place. And then what we have, and I'm sure you've heard about these, but you have endorphins in your brain. And this ties into the whole opioid crisis. This was found out, discovered in the early 70s, that you have these opioids that are naturally occurring in your brain. It's like the runner's high. It releases these. You feel good. It's how exercise might help you feel less pain. These endorphins are floating around. Why are they floating around? Well, they're kind of like keys. They go and they hit these receptors, opioid receptors, and the opioid receptors a lock. So you have the key, the lock, they couple, and they turn on the pain control engine. And so what you have in the middle of your brain, right, and where I put those keys is your periaqueductal gray, and that's the focal point of an elaborate system that your brain uses to stop pain. If you activate that area, just with an electrode or something, or a stimulator, that turns on pain control, and you feel a lot less pain. And so when you hurt your ankle or have an injury, your endorphins will get released, turn on the system, and turn off your pain. It sends a signal down, the stimulations come in less, and your pain is reduced. So that's great. So how do we take advantage of that and help people? Well, you have pain, you take an opioid. Say you take morphine. The morphine, those are supposed to be little pills, and the pills go there, and they do the same things your endorphins do. They turn on your pain control system, turn on this descending control thing, and you reduce your pain. So, and just for full disclosure, that's not the only place opioids work, but that's where they work really well. That's a strong place where they work. So that's all good. You take opioids, they turn on your pain control system. We don't have an opioid crisis. And we can stop pain. So our work is done. That's actually not true, because we've been trying at NIDA and other places to try to find an opioid that doesn't have abuse potential. And there always seems to have some, because they activate the same receptor. There might be ways to activate the receptor a little differently. People are trying to find that, but we don't have the magic bullet. And in reality, opioids don't just go to the PAG, the pain control area. You take a pill, they actually go everywhere. They're not targeted, they're not heat-seeking. We have some researchers that might be able to do targeted things, but right now they go everywhere, and everywhere has other functions. The other functions, well, it goes to the reward systems, it goes to your prefrontal cortex, and the whole system having to do with pleasure. And the problem with that is you go to your reward center. Let me get my, okay, it goes to your reward center, and you got your pain control, but it can also go to the reward center, and it's saying that feels good. That's nice. I want to do that more, and you get reinforced for that. And you do have a place in your brain that is involved with executive control. That's your prefrontal cortex. That tells you, hey, wait, don't do that. And that's a nice balance. If you've ever seen that that cartoon of a devil and an angel on your shoulders talking to each other, that's your prefrontal cortex and your accumbens. That's they're saying, do it, don't do it. It feels good. No, you'll lose your job. There's a nice balance there, and it's good for each to win a little bit. But the more people take drugs, I'm showing opioids in this case, the stronger the reward side gets. It takes over. It's like, I need to do this. This is how I have my fun. Other things that are fun stop being fun. You don't want to do them as much because drugs are so much fun. And there's a general decrease in the control from the angel, from the prefrontal cortex. It gets weaker. So the part that says, go, do drugs, gets stronger. I want to do drugs. The part that says, hey, don't do it. Think about your family, your friends. that's like getting real quiet and weak. And so it kind of gets to the point where you have something like a car with an accelerator down, but no brakes. And that's a change that the drug does to the brain that makes addiction become less of a choice, less of something one does just for a pastime or have fun or whatever, but becomes something that's a disease. And we are very much in line with a disease model of addiction. Okay. The other thing that happens, and there's multiple things that happen with drug addiction, but that this is a model by Dr. George Koob, and it talks about how addiction is not just a disease of having fun, the reward center. So it looks like, oh, your reward center is having fun, you're not stopping it. Okay, well, that could happen. It's bad, you get focused on that. But what happens over time, and this is the allosteric model, is that with the top part, you get high, you feel good, and then there's this low afterwards. You feel a little bad afterwards. And, you know, hangover, drugs make you feel a little depressed or down afterwards or jittery. But then you do it again, you feel high again, and then you have the after thing. But the problem is, there's a number of problems, but the problem is over time, you get less good feeling. And so you're high there. This is like normal mood. Your good feelings become less and less over time. I'm not saying it's for treatments or for use of the opioids or drugs, but over time, people don't have as much fun. They become tolerant to the fun of the drugs. But the bad part keeps getting worse. So that if you look at somebody that's addicted and is really having problems with drugs, they're not having fun anymore. They're taking drugs just to feel not quite as bad. Addiction is not a fun disease. And we're trying to do something to help people out of that mess. I got 3 key points I want to make here about addiction. First, addiction is compulsive use despite harm. You can't stop. You're hurting yourself. Your prefrontal cortex won't stop. It's saying you're harming yourself, but you're not stopping, and it's messing up your life. That's addiction. Dependence is often confused for addiction. If somebody in pain takes opioids for a long time, if they try to stop, like just one day, I'm done, they're going to have a physiological reaction that's unpleasant. It's pretty much a rule that it has to happen. That's not addiction. Your body is just used to it. You take it away, you have an adverse reaction, and then that goes away. But the people that are taking medications for pain and are not addicted will just have to go through that. But it's not addiction. And a lot of people confuse that because some people will think that almost anybody that takes pain meds becomes addicted. No, most don't. But most will become dependent. In fact, the numbers are something like 8%. I've seen estimates back in the 90s when this whole opioid crisis started, there was an estimate of 0. But I've seen estimates of addiction. If you take opioids for pain, 40% or more of people will become addicted. And that's probably not true either. It's probably somewhere around 8%, 9%. We don't know for sure because the study hasn't been done. The real study you want to do is to take a bunch of people that are in pain, start them on opioids, and see if they're having a problem with addiction, and then 2 years later, see how many became addicted. That study's being done. The FDA is making Big Pharma do these studies. I'm an advisor on that, and we'll have more results soon. But we don't really know the answer. But the most likely answer is most people that take opioids for pain do not become addicted. They just become dependent. Not that it's the best medication for everybody, but addiction, this opioid crisis is not caused by a lot of people in pain just running out, becoming addicted now. It's more the diversion. Next question is pain and addiction a disease? I addressed the addiction being a disease earlier. There's still the voluntary starting to do it, and that doesn't seem so much like a disease. But once the brain changes in the ways I described in other ways, it's essentially it's very, very difficult to stop, and your brain, the drugs take over. But pain also can become a disease. All right, let me take a breath. So pain is a good thing. Okay, you need pain. I told you earlier that some people are born without the ability to feel pain, and they have trouble living. It's a tough life because pain is sending you very important messages. And you have pain related to diseases, or injuries. You break your leg, that's going to hurt, and that's supposed to be there because you shouldn't be walking on your leg when it's broken, and so you have the pain to tell you not to walk on it. That's information too. However, pain can become centralized. I showed you the brain becoming all red. Well, with fibromyalgia, things like chronic regional pain syndrome, and other pain conditions, your brain now feels pain all the time, or nearly all the time. Things that shouldn't be painful are painful, like wind blowing on you. That is a painful condition, and that is a disease. That's not adaptive at that point. And then my last key point, and this one, we may get questions later about, I don't have the answers, but if we treat, if we consider addiction a disease, then where should the criminal justice system come in? Do we put people in jail for cancer? And it's not that simple, and I think the answer is somewhere in between, because there's the voluntary component of it and crimes associated with that can be associated with drug abuse. But I do like seeing that a lot of the criminal justice system has a medical component built in, and but that is a topic of a concern, and how we handle addiction. Previously, 30, 40 years ago, it tended to, drug addiction tended to be viewed as just criminal. And now, I think we're coming to more of an understanding, and I think it's great, that part of it is, at least part of it is a disease. And so, next slide, it's, when you think of drug abuse and pain, it's not just things that happen in a vacuum. All sorts of things happen to a person in pain: depression, anxiety, sleeplessness, and for people with drug abuse. And so I just put a couple of slides showing the relationship to suicide. And in terms of pain, people in pain tend to think about suicide, ideologize it, like 15 to or 18 to 50% of the time. The different studies are looking at this, but people in pain think about killing themselves, and people with chronic pain have twice the chance of killing themselves than people not in pain. This is going to become an issue, and I'll get to that towards the end of my talk, but a lot of people are being taken off opioids, and that might lead to suicide if they get taken off the wrong way. So I'll be advocating for them being taken off or reduced, if appropriate, for their health in the right way, so that would help them. And then the same thing is for substance use disorder. People who abuse drugs tend to have much greater suicide rates too. So that's another concern for with opioid use disorder, how we handle that. All right. I'm gonna get on to other drugs to some degree, because I work at the National Institute on Drug Abuse, not the National Institute on Opioid Abuse, and there's other drugs out there too that are problems or should be addressed. We should be concerned with not just opioids, despite the fact that there's a crisis. And this data is from 2018. It's very concerning. And just stay with me on this slide for a minute. So on the left, this is just showing you all these drugs of abuse and how many people have died since 1999, and it's all over the place up to 2016. And it's kind of, it's not really a pattern. There was a pattern when I showed the opioids, the three phases of it. But if you look on the right side, this is from 1980 to 2016. It's cumulative deaths from overdose from drugs over that period of time. And what these researchers did was to take a exponential curve, a curve that starts slow and gets faster, 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 and match that on the dotted line onto the increase in death rates. And it's something like, 99% correlated. Death rates, if you don't just look at opioids, look at all drugs, they're soaring up. and they're following a mathematical pattern that indicates steady growth. Doesn't mean it has to be, and we're going to do everything for it not to be. But first, the rates are. This looks like a trend that's been going on for decades, and it looks like a trend that's not just opioids, and it suggests to me that something bigger is going on. I mean, we could talk about the pain and opioids and the prescribing, and yeah, that's true. But this might be, this whole drug abuse crisis might be part of something bigger. And I think part of it has to do with communities and how you folks can help, and communities across the country. That's just my personal opinion. I'll get on that a little more down the road. Okay, so let's talk about some other drugs. Cocaine. Lots of people are dying of cocaine, and in fact, in a study we did, the number of people who look at people of color versus white people, people of color dying of cocaine overdose at about the same rate that white people are dying from prescription opioids. So that's a big problem, especially to that population. Part of that, full disclosure, is probably cocaine being laced with fentanyl, which got counted as both. But still, cocaine remains an issue. Marijuana. Now watch this map. It just gets colorized. You guys are ahead of the curve. And green is, you can look at what it is, but it's more and more dark, means it's more and more legal. And this trend doesn't look like it's going to change. Here's some of the most recent data. I won't go through it, but marijuana is everywhere. It's legal here. It's legal in a lot of states now, and its medicinal value decriminalized. So, and that's something we have to look at. What are the positives and negatives of that reality? At the NIH, we are studying the medicinal value of cannabinoids for pain. We put out a big announcement, and we're trying to get a better idea, because if you go to your dispensary, like they'll tell you, that won't work for you, but maybe this will. And this will work for somebody, but if you have respiratory problems, you probably shouldn't take it. So those are kind of things that we want to look around that. This is just a picture I took. This is a few blocks from NIDA headquarters. We have a dispensary now. And actually we have 3. So it's like they're everywhere. Look at this. And so this change is really happening. And we want to know, now realistically, could you replace some opioids with cannabinoids? It looks like, basic research looks like they can be analgesic, but for who and stuff like that. Can you get people off? Opioids by with cannabinoids? People report that on the internet that they're doing it, but where's the research? Can we look at that? I went to 2 of the 3 dispensaries near NIDA. I just popped in at lunch. Hi, I'm from NIDA. It's like, and I wanted to see if our director could visit, but it was interesting. This is also something we're studying, because the first one seemed like it was bulletproof glass and locks and security. It's like, this doesn't look like a medical facility. But then I went to the second one, and it was like a medical office. The receptionist there, and the president came out, and he sat down in a meeting room. I said, I'm from NIDA, and he actually said, oh, I'd love to talk to you. And he knew about cannabinoids, we were just, he was very into the science of it. So, and that's another thing I think we could keep an eye on, is in what places and who's promoting this for medical purposes with data, and who's just selling it as just make money. So I'm not sure, but I got a very different feel from each of those. All right, so I'm going to just talk about some of the state of affairs, what the future is, and this is a youth symposium. So NIDA does a monitoring the future study each year. They ask high school kids about their drug use. And they've been doing it for many, many years, seeing what's trends over time. And in general, the trends are very good. There's hundreds of slides from this. I'm not showing them. I'll show just a few key points. If you look at high school seniors, the report using opioids other than heroin, that's going down. See the 18 number, a steady trend down. So that's a positive sign in terms of non-heroin. If you look at heroin, it's still pretty low. It's hugging 0. So there's no disturbing trends there. If you look at Vicodin, a prescription opioid, that's going down in 8th graders, 10th graders, and 12th graders. So I think the kids are getting it. These things are killing a lot of people, and we shouldn't take them. So that's good news. OxyContin is going down a bit. The trend is clearly there over the years. Not as sharp as Vicodin, but it's going down. Marijuana. This is interesting. I showed the map becoming green and California becoming green and all that. Marijuana in kids seems pretty level. So even though it seems more available and these dispensaries don't sell to kids, it seems at this point that there's not a change in accordance with these changed laws. Alcohol is going down in kids and 8th graders. Still a lot, but it's going down in 8th, 10th, and 12th graders. And this one, this isn't a trend line. It's not over time because it's new, but it's about vaping. And this one, we're going to have to keep an eye on where the trends are. And these, just this one data point or one time point seems rather high. This is 8th graders, 10th graders, and 12th graders vaping, and looks like any vaping is about 40% for 12th graders, and then it's high for all of them, actually. It looks very high. I mean, they have 20% on 10th and 12th graders, and like over 10% for 8th graders are vaping nicotine. And there's the argument that vaping is a good way to not smoke. You vape instead of smoking. But on the other hand, it might work the other direction. Smoking's been going down for years, and it kills a lot of people. But will this vaping introduce kids to marijuana, nicotine, and then the vaping itself? We're not sure it is safe because you are literally vaping. One of the solvents is propylene glycol, which is antifreeze. I went to a vaping store too and talked to them, and they said it was safe. I said, but it's propylene glycol. So, but they assured me it's fine. So, but that's their opinion. Okay, so what are we doing? Time's still good? Okay, what are we doing? This, I have nothing to do with study, but I'm a big fan of it. This is the Adolescent Brain Cognitive Development Study. Those studies I was showing you before from Monitoring the Future, they are just asking questionnaires over time, and you don't know it's the same kids or anything. This is a study where, and so you don't know if what caused what. You don't know if you find kids that are having problems with marijuana, if kids are smoking marijuana, they tend to have a lower IQ, just a few points, but it's lower. But you don't know if they're lower IQ, let them just smoke marijuana, or the reverse. But this study is looking at kids, I think it's starting at 8 or 10 years old, scanning their brains, and it's going to study them over a long period of time and see when they start drugs, how their brain changes, how their development changes. And it's not just about drugs, but it will give some answers, that because kids' brains are very vulnerable, and if they start doing drugs, how big of an impact will it have on them? And we'll have the data, because you can always say that it's not cause and effect, but here you can show that it wasn't that way, they did the drugs, and now it is that way, or not. But this is going to give us a wealth of information. NIH, a lot of NIH institutes are involved with this, NIH is the lead. The CDC guidelines. Now, this is another thing. This isn't the NIH is doing this, but the CDC guidelines, and we advise them on this, created guidelines for prescribing opioids for chronic pain. And basically what they were saying is you give less. 50 morphine equivalents, that's 50 grams or milligrams is equivalent to 50 milligrams of morphine in terms of dose, is what you normally would give to people in chronic pain. Go up to 90, in some circumstances go over 90 morphine equivalents, and that's something you have to take special care with. And opioids were given a lot more than that before these guidelines. So give less for acute pain, 3 to 4 days is recommended, no more than 7. Don't give somebody a month's supply when they have a toothache or something. And that's really happens a lot, because people with acute pain, a surgical procedure, the clinicians don't necessarily, they may not expect the pain to last for a month, but they want to make sure that the patient has it just in case. It's probably better to give them less, and if they come back with pain, give them more than have all these opioids on the street. And then a preference for short-acting opioids, ones you take for 4 hours. Just start with them instead of ones that last for 24 hours. Okay, now I'm going to shift gears here a bit. So the CDC guidelines, they're good. They're trying to reduce opioids, but you have to do the other things. So I've got 20 minutes left. I love this concept, so bear with me. I think it explains something of what's going on with the opioid crisis. So polarities is something I learned about in leadership training. There's a whole science of it. And what a polarity is when you have two poles. It could be inhale, exhale. You don't want to always inhale, you don't want to always exhale. Or take risks versus use caution. Both of those are good sometimes. Conservative, progressive. Both are good sometimes. Big picture, detail, focus, then think and act. You don't want to just think all the time, not do anything. You don't want to act and not think. You got to go back and forth. And so polarity is when there's two sides of a thing. And these things exist all through religion and governments and business and societal. There's always these push and pulls where there's two ends that are both good, and factions are moving you to either side. Well, I bring this up because of the opioid crisis. People talk about the pendulum swinging the other way. Well, that's what happens with a polarity. You go one way, you inhale, you exhale. You inhale, you exhale. You think, you act. You think, you act. Well, in terms of opioids, I think we're in polarity because back in the 90s, opioids were bad. And then all sorts of things started telling us we should use more opioids. And then more and more get used, but what happens in a polarity is you swing way to the other side. So that opioids were prescribed way more than they should, and then the problems started coming. Now we're swinging backwards with the CDC guidelines, which is reasonable, but the pendulum might swing too far where people that are getting benefits from opioids don't, and it could crush them. That's something I don't want to happen. We don't want to happen. We want to fight the opioid crisis, but not at the expense of people in pain. So I think we're in a polarity, the pendulum swinging back and forth. How do you remedy a polarity? Well, first thing is you know you're in one. You got to say, I'm in a polarity. Say, okay, I think we're in a polarity. The second part is you got to manage the middle. Somewhere in the middle. We shouldn't get rid of opioids completely unless we find some magic better drugs, and we're trying to do that, but they still have their use. But we shouldn't give them to everybody, like we've been doing, and causing all sorts of problems. We have to somehow use them smarter and not use them smarter. And that means you have to be in the middle of this pendulum. Somewhere in the middle is more the right answer. It's harder to be in the middle because you get from both ends that people on either side are saying you're doing the wrong thing. But it's the place where, and it's not a fixed spot, but it's the place we should be. And I don't know where the middle is. That's what we have to figure out. But again, I think we have to use opioids smarter and not use them smart. And that's what the final phase of this talk is going to focus on. It's going to how we treat addiction or treat pain better, and not have our fight against the opioid crisis come back and crush people in pain. We can do both. We can fight the opioid crisis and we can help people in pain at the same time. So this is the National Pain Strategy. That's Josie Briggs. She put this on a slide. She doesn't like me to do it. I probably should stop. But it was on the NIH Pain Consortium side. This is a national plan. This was a national plan to help people in pain. And it works on the societal level, and it's trying to improve education of the patient, get better reimbursement, provider education, disparities. It's just population level plan for the nation to improve pain treatment. And what I think we could do, and this is again, yin-yang is a polarity too, is I think we need to take better care of people in pain and use less opioids. And so let me give you some examples. Okay, so this, and it doesn't have to be a challenge to do that, okay? Because this is a slide I made a few years back about all the different things we could do to help fight prescription opioid abuse. this isn't the entire list, but if you go down, there's a lot we can do. We could get better monitoring of people's uses, better public education, naloxone rescue. All these different things could help, and we could do more too. And then I made a list of all sorts of things we could do to help fight pain. And a lot of those things are the same things. Better biomarkers for pain, I'm going to mention them in a second. New medications for pain and drug abuse. It's just, we can do both, and it's unethical to fight the opioid crisis or fight one disease at the expense of other people. We have to help everybody, and that's what we're trying to do. So we published this in 2015, just saying we need a shared solution for the opioid crisis and for the pain crisis. They don't have to be distinct. In fact, working together against them, we can eliminate a lot of inadequate pain treatment and improve the use of opioids. So, all right, now this is when I tell you about my fun projects that are at the NIH. There's a whole lot going on, but I'm going to start with a few fun ones that aren't big, aren't new or ongoing, and then I'm going to tell you about the big HEAL initiative. So that's the director of the National Institute on Drug Abuse. She's in virtual reality classes. She doesn't know I'm there anymore. That's Nora Volkov. She likes cool technology. She's really amazing how she takes to these sort of things. But anyway, we are, and I got to this conference, by the way. I was speaking across the mountain, over the mountain at a virtual reality conference. That is taking off. Those goggles are cheap now. They used to be $40,000. Now they're $150 or $200 for some of them. I have it in my basement. It's fun. But how can we use it medically? And what we're doing at the NIH is looking at how we can control cues, how we can use cognitive behavioral therapy to help people with opioid use disorder. You put them in there, you can control the stimuli, you can train them to be better at resisting drugs. And for pain too, you put somebody in one of those things and do a procedure that has a lot of emotional component too, they might not even know. Like kids, if you, research by Jeffrey Gold in Los Angeles, he'll have kids that they give a needle puncture to. That really doesn't hurt that much. But if you have a kid, sees the needle go in, they scream like a baby. But if you put them in the goggles, nobody cares. And everybody's relieved. The doctors, the parents, the people in the waiting room, they're all relieved. So we're trying to find how various technologies, and VR won't solve the crisis, but it's one thing that could help. And just to demonstrate the power of VR, this is from Richie's plank experience. You go up on the elevator, and then the elevator opens up, and you're supposed to walk out on a board that's suspended over the city. And even though you know it's not real, I'm in my house, it's carpet right there, people don't go. I mean, they will, but they're really scared. And for me, that shows the power of it. And research on this in pain and drug abuse has been done in NIDA for a number of years, and we were kind of pioneers with this, but now a lot of the other institutes don't look at all the details here. They're long lines. These are funded projects by a bunch of different institutes. I'm very happy to see that the leader's no longer NIDA, it's NIMH, because I think there's a lot of psychological things that can be done within the VR environment. Okay, PCORI. This isn't something that NIDA funded, but it's really something I'd like to get in there, and they did ask us for advice, and they're looking at how to taper opioids better. Okay, remember the opioid-induced hyperalgesia, the vicious cycle that might be there when people are taking handful of pills and not feeling that good anyway. Well, what patients, if you reduce their pills in a certain way, in the right way, will feel better? And I think that a lot of people will if you do it right, but we need the research to be able to tell a given person in pain that if we give you less pills and do it this way, you'll feel less pain down the road and you're going to be more active. Most people in pain would take that offer. They don't want to taper. Some don't want to taper because they're afraid of the terrible pain. But most will want to taper if it helps them. Pain is a very good motivator, and getting out of pain, even if it means taking less opioids, will be accepted by most. And that won't help the opioid crisis, but it will help people in pain feel better, and that's important. my Centers of Excellence in Pain Education. We're trying to improve pain education in medical, dental, nursing, pharmacy schools. I showed you how there's virtually none or very little. There's a lot of people who want to change that. These are the people from those centers. They're out there, ambassadors. They're creating online educational modules that we have. We have 15 of these online right now, and we're trying to get these pumped into the curriculum because pain is such a big problem. It's the biggest medical problem in terms of costs and people in our society, and to put 9 hours of training into teaching people about pain seems vastly inadequate. So we're doing our part, other people are doing their part. And then the final thing. Now this is the big thing, okay? Because I work in the government, and I sometimes make the mistake of saying, oh, that was only a $5 million project, and it's like, that's a lot of money. So, but this is big. This is the Helping End Addiction Long-Term Initiative. The NIH has gotten $500 million for pain and opioid crisis. Last year, we're getting $500 million this year, and we're going to keep getting probably a lot of money to help with the opioid crisis. So that I love, because first of all, we need money for those things, but second of all, pain was part of it too. Half of this, you see pain up there, I'm sure. Yeah, there it is. Half of this is for people in pain. So it's not just the NIH saying we're going to fight the opioid crisis and forget about people in pain. They get that we need to do both, a shared solution, and work on both sides of the solution. So much of the HEAL initiative, that has to do with pain is being done by institutes that are not NIDA. There's the Neurology Institute, there's 25 institutes that do pain. They're working on most of the pain initiatives led by the Neurology Institute. And they're doing things like clinical trial network for pain. They're trying to get better models for pain, better pain medications. I'm going to tell you about one that's something I've been trying to get going for a long time. Now it's happening in a big way. Trying to get better measures of pain. Spend a lot of money. Pain changes you in a lot of ways. You're different. If you see somebody in chronic pain with fibromyalgia, they look very, very different. How do we measure their pain? Well, it's a little more complicated, but we tend to use a Smiley scale. And that, yeah, people giggle because it does in no way captures the full experience of pain. Pain affects people on the psychological, biological, social, spiritual levels. It's your whole body changes with pain. You can't represent that with one number, and we can do better than that. My analogy is if you went to a doctor and they asked how high you feel, and you did little campfires. I mean, we need a thermometer for that, and that's why I proposed. That's why. Oh, and here's the head of the NIH. I was thrilled. Here's head of NIH 2 years ago advocating for better pain measures, and he's been a staunch advocate for this, and we've funded 3 significant initiatives on this right now. I used to call this project the Painometer, and then it caught on, and it's like in the news and stuff, and it's like, oh, now I'm getting a little flack because it's a silly name, but I can't stop that now. The funny thing, I'm driving to work, and I heard on the radio, the NIH is making a Painometer. It's like, oh my God. So anyway, what will this do for us? Well, if you go in for treatment, instead of them guessing on what you have, they could take a look at these metrics and get a much better picture of the type of pain you have. There's so many types of pain, and what treatments might work best. It's not just go through a bunch of, let's try this, try this, try this. It says you need these 3 things, and people with your sort of pain get better, and you get it. So that's one thing that can be done. We want better translation. Get these metrics into drug development, treatment development, so that you can study and have a better idea is in your clinical trial or whatever, however you're testing it, if your treatment works. And then also what people works. Well, it works with these people with this type of pain, but not with this picture of pain. And then transformative. We want to get the entire picture of pain. Measure everything, not everything, but measure the whole experience from the gut to the spinal cord, the brain, the blood, the genes, and just make this picture as complete as possible. And that can inform the rest of the things. So one last initiative I want to talk about. And this gets back to communities and you. And sorry about using too many smiley faces. I just got on a roll and it's just, okay. So healing communities. This is a major project being done by the NIH to go into some towns and help. So if you think of drug abuse, you have your people that are not abusing drugs and they're relatively normal, and then you have somebody that's having a problem on the right, and there's too much stigma. They're often pushed to the side. They're not, or they're thought of as different, and they don't get as much community support as they could. And what we're advocating with that is to find ways to help the community heal, help the body heal itself. It's like if you have a disease, you have a chest cold, you don't just attack the cold, you help the immune system, you help the body own defenses, help the sick part. And we're all one, we're a community, and we need to help instead of stigmatizing and pushing people away, we got to bring them in and help them. So that's what we'd like to do. If you look globally, I mean, these problems are all over the place. And what we would do with healing communities is to go into some areas that, say, some of the most hard-hit areas where Appalachia, say, and fix things. Do everything you can to help the community help the people around it, and provide services, provide support, education, and so we're going to fund probably 3 areas of the country. And if we go into there and give them what they need, give them everything we need to help, will they then, will they heal? Will they heal themselves? This was done in, if anybody hasn't read Dreamland, I'm not endorsing it, but it's a great book. At the end of Dreamland, talking about the opioid crisis, there was a town where they went in and started to fix things, like cleaned up the town, fixed the windows, gave more support. And that became this center for, right in Portsmouth, Ohio, right in the opioid belt, where people were getting better. And so the vision of the NIH is to help communities help themselves and help the people in them to get better. So that is why I'm so thrilled to be amongst this, because we have representatives. You've brought in people from all sorts of aspects of the community together, and that working together, I think we can help people in pain, but also curb the opioid crisis by not pushing people away, but you bring them together. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Thomas. I think we might have time for 1 or 2 questions. Does anyone have any questions? Or we can also save these questions to the end when we're at the panel. So anyone got any burning questions? We have one right here. Oh.
Aren't these talks today all online on the website, so we don't have to furiously take notes?
Great point. Thank you for reminding me. Yes, they are all on the website, www.calcianayouthsymposium.org.
And if you want to email me, I'll send anybody mine, so you're good.
Oh, Suzanne.
So I wrote it down, and thanks for the VR stuff.
Oh,
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I think it's really...
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, yeah. Happy to do that. You had a slide about the adolescent brain study, and I'm wondering if there's any little more pearls of sort of new information that you can share with us about that study. Is something that would be applicable for us?
Yeah, I can, a little bit. I mean, they're almost done enrolling. It's got to be years of studying, and they're going to do imaging over time and get a lot of data. I would just go to our website on that, because I'm not the lead guy. Dowling is, and I'd be doing a disservice by going on beyond that. I'm thrilled by the study, but I'm not. I just know of it, and it's just a NIDA-led thing.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I thought it was already done. So great. It's just starting.
Not done. And the data, I believe it's true, will be available for other people to research too. We're doing our studies, but this will be a massive database where people can ask all sorts of questions about how development happens and what interacts with what, and hopefully understand how to encourage better development and find ways, find when there are problems.
Thank you.
Sure.
Question here, right?
How do we get Santa Cruz on a short list for that, those studies that you're talking about?
Well, first of all, it sounds like you're doing okay. I mean, you are. But what about Santa Cruz? I was talking to Linda about this. You're kind of a bubble in a way that's like ideal, as opposed to being part of a major metropolitan area or being a blur with other communities. You are more of a close-knit community. So I could see this happening. The applications are already in for it, and so I don't know if Santa Cruz applied or if you're part of it, but the idea is not just to help 3 communities. It's to go into 3 communities, show that we can make a difference, and then have them be like models for how we can expand that. The caveat is, and Sarah's here and she'll tell you, it's not exact science, so you know exactly what caused what. But you will know that if you really go after it, you can make a difference. And that's the point we're trying to make. So if not the first round, maybe the second round.
All right, well, please join me in giving another round of applause for Dr. Thomas. Thank you.